It's time now for Countywide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Join News Director Paul David and News Editor Philip Catalfamo as they talk with our community's leaders, newsmakers, and people in the know. You'll hear about the hot topics in Yavapai County that affect all our lives. And now here's today's Countywide.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Countywide. I'm your host Philip Catalfamo. I'd like to thank you for joining me. On today's show we're talking heat-related illness, and my guest in studio today is Community Integrated Paramedic for Sedona Fire, Eric Walter. Eric, welcome in studio.
Thank you very much.
Well, heat-related illness is obviously still a very big topic right now, although we have found some monsoonal moisture, which is very, very nice. Yes. But first and foremost, Community Integrated Paramedic, I kind of want to break down what that job title is for you. So what is your day like?
Well, about 3 years ago, Sedona Fire decided to start looking at our medical calls a lot like our fire calls. How can we prevent them? So what we ended up doing is setting up my position, which I was lucky enough to get. And the goal was to find people with medical needs that don't necessarily need a 911 ambulance transport. So the analogy I use is if grandma has a walker and she has 3 falls this week because the walker's broken, it's not the 911 call to the ER that's going to fix these problems. It's we need to fix the walker. So we started looking backwards on a lot of these patients, and we've had a lot of success. We're always moving forward, but that basically we call it medical prevention. It's almost like fire prevention. It's medical prevention. So that's what we're trying for.
And that's probably good too, because if, like you mentioned in your example, grandma's not having an issue with herself, it's just an equipment issue.
Sure.
So she doesn't have to go to the emergency room, and she's not taking up spots for people who actually do need to be there.
Well, and that's the goal, is we want people to get the appropriate care. It's just because you call 911 doesn't mean that an emergency room visit is needed. A lot of our mental health issues that we're having in our society, they don't necessarily need to be in an emergency room, they need to be in a mental health facility. So we just want to make sure people go to get the right care, not just any care.
So the topic of today's show is obviously heat-related illness. It's still a very, very big topic now. Like I mentioned, we are starting to get cooler temperatures, and the monsoon, as of recording of this show, has started to peek its head around the Four Corners and making its way up to the Verde Valley and up to the high country. But still, heat-related illness is very, very big. We're still in the 100s down in Sedona and here in Cottonwood. I know it's a little cooler up in Flagstaff, obviously, but still, heat-related illness, is still a very big topic. So first and foremost, what are the first initial signs when you're out on the trail and you see somebody suffering from a heat-related illness?
Sure. Excuse me. Initially, you're going to start feeling lightheaded, dizzy. Usually, a little bit of fatigue sets in. You get tired. That's the initial setting in of heat exhaustion. That's the first step of heat illness that we kind of look at. That is very reversible. A little cold water, sitting in the shade, those types of things. Unfortunately, if heat illness progresses, if we don't cool off, if we don't get that water, we start moving into what's called heat stroke. Now, heat stroke is slurred speech, seizures, heavy breathing, heavy sweating, and actually you can actually sweat to the point where you're not sweating anymore, and you're super dehydrated. Now, that is very irreversible if we don't get some interventions going pretty quickly. So it's very serious to have heat stroke. So it'll start slow, but it will continue to progress unless we do something about heat illness.
So if it, like I mentioned, if you and I are hiking and I'm starting to heat relate, starting to show those symptoms, maybe even something more severe like a heat stroke, what do I do? What should you do? First thing you should do?
Well, the first thing, know yourself, know where you're at. If somebody's feeling dizzy, let's sit them down. Let's get them out of the sun. Let's make sure that we do any, loosen clothing, take hats off, things that'll help cool somebody down, fan them off. And a lot of times that doesn't require like an emergency response. That's just a common sense, okay, we've exerted ourselves a little too much.
Right.
Now, if we're getting to the point where we're having slurred speech, if we're having seizures, that's a 911 call. We need a 911 call immediately because the fire department needs to come, hike in, and do some interventions to make sure that that doesn't progress into something more serious.
Now, before we go out on the trail, what's the first thing that we should do?
Hydrate, hydrate, hydrate.
Okay.
Lots of water. That's just common sense for everybody.
Right.
But a lot of the emergencies Sedona Fire sees on the trail is just people unprepared, didn't drink enough water the day before. It doesn't start 20 minutes before your hike. It starts the day before. Drink plenty of water, make sure our nutrition's good. Make sure we're eating normal things. Just a cup of coffee isn't enough right before you go do 5 miles. So obviously, like you said, the dietary thing, and this is different from each person, like you mentioned. You do have those constant hikers, the people who are out on the trails every single day doing those 7+ mile hikes, and then you've got people more like myself who's just kind of the weekend. I got some friends coming up from Phoenix. We're going to go down over to Bell Trail. So it's really
basically knowing what your comfortability
Oh,
is.
absolutely. I mean, we have people that do the 30-mile hikes over a few days. They know their body. What they do is they know how to manage their water. They're usually more fit, so they require less water,
right.
And that's fine. The biggest thing is we don't want somebody that has not been hiking, doesn't understand, that hasn't just been doing it. That's not the time to figure out, oh, I'm going to try a new diet and then I'm going to run 5 miles onto the trail.
Right.
Let's figure out slowly, incrementally, and build yourself up to those big hikes.
Because you might go hiking with somebody, and I've had that experience of hiking with people who, have done it for so long and can go those 7, 8, 9 miles.
Sure.
Or there was a story we had a couple days ago where guys were hiking for 2 days.
Yep.
I know there's some trails down at the Grand Canyon where you can basically be out there for a whole week just going from one point to another point. But so really the biggest thing is just to know yourself.
Sure. I mean, the first big hike you don't want to have is straight through the Grand Canyon.
No.
Let's take it incrementally.
I'm quitting after 2 days.
3 miles, exactly. But the biggest thing is just know the trail you're on. And there's so many good websites to check that'll let you know how much elevation gain. Just because it's 3 miles, if it's 3 miles with a lot of elevation gain, that's a lot harder than 3 miles as a loop. That's very easy. So just research a little bit, know what trail you're on, and kind of know your comfortability level. Then those hikes end up well.
Yeah. Now, are you preparing the same way for every kind of hike? Now, obviously, you can go down to Sedona and you can do a quick 30-minute, maybe under an hour hike, or you can do, like we just mentioned, those big Grand Canyon hikes.
Sure.
Or even the change in elevations where the hike might just be an hour and you happen to go up and down a couple times, like if you go to Wet Beaver Creek.
Absolutely.
Are you preparing the same way for each of those hikes, or is it more a matter of the duration, how much you should consume before?
Absolutely. Every hike's individualized. If you're just taking a 20-minute, stroll and you're used to it, your water, you don't need quite as much. Right. Now, one thing we do recommend anytime you leave, make sure your cell phone's charged all the way, make sure somebody knows where you are, make sure your footwear's appropriate, your clothing's appropriate. Because a lot of the emergencies that we go on are the reason we're there is a factor of one of those things I talked about. Something didn't work out right. And having a cell phone with a full battery makes it a lot easier for emergency responders to find you, because we've had a lot of calls where 911 and then the phone dies, and that becomes a lot harder to get our guys out on the trail to help.
Right. And you talk about the proper clothing too. My dad is a landscaper, so he's out constantly outside, working outside, and they wear long sleeves. And I remember when he first started working there, I was still a little kid. Sure. It always confused me why he wore a long sleeve shirt, because I always associated long sleeve clothing for the cold winter, or the cold times, or whatever, the cold season. But it's really kind of a smart idea to wear a long sleeve shirt while you're out hiking, and possibly pants. Are we okay with the pants?
Pants are fine. The biggest thing is make sure you're wearing breathable things. Like not heavy wools type of fabrics. You want something that breathes. And actually, that's something Sedona Fire actually just dove into this year. Is we realized, we were sending our guys out in cotton shirts, and that was fine. It was retaining a lot of water. So what we ended up getting them was sun shirts. It's much more breathable, and we're trying to reduce skin cancer further down the line for our guys. So things like that cover your skin, keep the sun off you, that's always good, but make sure it's very breathable.
Okay, so most important thing always, before you go out on a hike, make sure you eat some food, make sure you hydrate the day before, depending on the duration of the hike, drink water the day of, bring water with you, wear proper clothing, breathable materials if you're going to wear a long sleeve shirt and or pants, and
footwear.
Footwear, fully charged cell phone. Don't go out there hiking in sandals and have a half charged phone. But we still got a lot to talk about regarding heat related illness. When we come back on the other side of this break, County Water will be right back. Don't go anywhere.
Starting in the late 1920s, Grandpa Gettle and his brothers laid the groundwork for what would become a family legacy. Almost 100 years and 100 patents later, Gettle's High Desert Mechanical continues to raise the bar of quality heating, cooling, and plumbing products and services in the Verde Valley.
Call Gettle's High Desert Mechanical Heating, Air Conditioning, and Plumbing at 567-2200 or online at GettlesHDM.com, providing solutions for your comfort. Don't settle. Get Gettles.
Hi, this is Greg at Verde Solar Power. Arizona has lots of clean, renewable sunshine, and we want to help you take advantage of it with our quality solar installations, and we offer to beat any written offer on a residential solar electric system. So bring us your electric bill and let us show you how solar power will save you money. We're located conveniently here in the Verde Valley and are dedicated to helping the valley go solar. So remember, the energy solution comes up every morning.
So I just moved in with this family, and it's embarrassing. The little one, he likes to go outside and crawl around in the giant litter box. I don't know what he's doing. I mean, I was born and I knew how to use the litter box. Look at that. That's disgusting. Oh, poop already. You're making me nervous. Oh, okay, I can't look at this anymore. I really hope he grows out of this, for his sake.
Orkin has pest control down to a science.
When your business chooses Orkin's Precision Protection Program, you get a tailored pest control program for your specific industry and environment.
Your business can benefit from over a century of experience, training, and scientific knowledge that define the Orkin man.
Maximum protection, minimum exposure, backed by one of the industry's most comprehensive guarantees.
Choose your locally owned and operated Northern Arizona Orkin and get more than an exterminator. Get an expert.
I want to welcome you back here to Countywide. I'm your host, Philip Catalfamo, and I thank you for rejoining us. We are talking with Community Integrated Paramedic for Sedona Fire, Eric Walter, and we are talking heat-related illness. In our first segment, we talked about some of the things to look out for when you're out on the trails and somebody starts to show the signs of a heat-related illness. We also talked about some of the precautions you should take before you go out and hike, wearing breathable clothing, wearing the proper shoes, bringing a fully charged cell phone, letting somebody know where you're going, when you'll be back, drinking water, bringing snacks, pre-gaming essentially in a way, but with water and proper nutrition. Heat-related illness is a very easy thing to get if you're really not that prepared.
It is. It is. We live in a very warm area. We're hot and dry, and the surroundings we have are very pretty, so it's very easy to say, oh, I'm going to go take a hike through those. And a lot of people come visit us for that reason. A lot of our locals go hiking for that reason. Right. And we're so happy that people use the outdoors. We just ask, be prepared, take your water, and because a lot of those things, the heat-related illness, it's very serious, and one side effect is we always talk about, the heat illness itself. Right. A lot of times we go on fall injuries or broken limbs because somebody had a heat illness and then fell. So it's not always the heat illness that we go on the call for, it's the secondary thing that happens after the heat illness. And a
heat-related illness doesn't necessarily just happen out on the trails. I mean, you could suffer a heat-related illness just being in your backyard, working outside.
It's very common. A lot of times too, doing common yard work, you didn't plan on. A lot of times a project that you thought would take 15 minutes takes a lot longer. Biggest thing is make sure you're drinking plenty of water. If you start feeling that fatigue, sit down, drink a lot of water, have a snack, and just kind of self-monitor. Something that Sedona Fire's even had is a lot of people, even with medication changes, they'll be doing something very routine, and now that has become different because of the medication change, and it can cause a heat-related illness. They can even happen in your home. If you're not drinking enough water, and a lot of times people have the air conditioner broken or not working, it can happen anywhere. It doesn't have to happen on a trail.
Yeah, I have a swamp cooler at home, and whenever it's slightly humid outside, that thing just does not want to work, so I'm usually pounding the water inside, or I have to try to because it's just 90 degrees in my house.
Absolutely.
But is there a specific age group that you see more heat-related illness or less?
Statistically for us, I wouldn't say there is one. Now, younger folks, young kids, and older folks are going to be more susceptible just because of body metabolism and all the other things. One common thread that we've seen, though, for the heat-related illness is it's a change in behavior and action so I haven't hiked in 3 years. I'm going to go do 5 miles.
Right.
Okay, if you haven't done it, let's pick something smaller, it's more achievable, and just make sure you're feeling okay, because on a vacation, that's not the time to find out how you're going to respond to 100 degrees and no water.
What a great trip to Sedona. Dad had to go to the hospital because he had a heat-related illness.
Many people have to deal with that every year through the fire department, and we, as much as we're happy to help, we'd rather you just enjoy your vacation.
And like I mentioned earlier on, my dad is a landscaper, so he has to obviously pay attention to a lot of that stuff. There was one weird period where he would drink salt water while he was outside. This was during the summertime in Southern California. We're talking Phoenix-type weather.
Yes.
Is that something that you could do? I don't want to say recommend it, but is that an option for people possibly?
So the reason for the salt water is when we sweat a lot, we lose a lot of sodium out of our system. Now, when we have an electrolyte imbalance, our bodies change. Now, if it becomes too severe, we can have muscle problems, and a lot of times it'll become muscle cramps, and people call them heat cramps. But if that progresses, it can become cardiac issues. So it's not necessarily the sodium. I'd say all electrolytes, we need to just make sure we're replacing those. Most of the time, just a proper diet can replace those, knowing how much to eat. But again, your dad being the landscaper outside, he probably knew his body well enough to know I'm losing more sodium than I am anything else, and drinking a little salt water makes me feel normal again. So I wouldn't recommend just a salt water, but just make sure we're paying attention to we're losing electrolytes when we sweat. Let's make sure we replace those. And
that doesn't make you more dehydrated?
It does not. No, it doesn't. Now it can make you feel like you need to drink more water. Right. That's salty snacks always make people want to drink more. But we are still getting the water into our system. Okay. It's not making us get rid of water any faster. Now, I don't know that direct salt water is any better than, say, a Gatorade, but just making sure that we're replacing those electrolytes and we're not just drinking just water, because water doesn't have the electrolytes, so eventually we're going to deplete the electrolytes and then we're going to have side effects.
So, and I know also a buddy of mine bought those electrolyte packets, same thing.
Same thing,
pretty much.
And the biggest advice I could give to those is don't try them the first time on a 5-mile hike to see if that's what's going to work for you. Right. Check them out at home, make sure they, because if that's the only thing you're doing to replace the electrolytes, if that's not the right amount for you, you could have issues. Again, it's just knowing your own system, knowing what your body is comfortable with.
A lot of people will go hiking with their kids and pets. Yes. That's another big thing, making sure that they don't suffer heat-related illness. Yes. You don't want to deal with that. Anything like that. So let's go into some of the early signs. I know probably more for kids it would be the red face and sure. Maybe getting a little whiny, I guess, or just irritated, and of course they should because they're hot. But what about pets? Where do you see that in probably more dogs than anything?
More, than anything.
They're bringing a cat to the trail. That'd be fascinating.
That would be. We haven't been on that call. We've been on lots of dog calls. The biggest thing with pets is make sure you need a lot of water. They need just as much, if not more. Make sure they're, if it's a hot day, their paws are being taken care of, because you can have actually injuries to dogs and their paws. And just like human beings, if Fido hasn't been on a hike in 5 years, today's not the day to find out if he can do a really long one. Right. Let's make sure the exercise meets what we've been doing normally. Kids, firefighters, we always enjoy having the kids visit the station, but what we've learned about kids and these heat-related calls, kids will compensate very, very well, and then suddenly they'll have a very severe reaction. Mm-hmm. So paying attention to the kids, make sure they have a ton of water, making sure the hike's appropriate. If it's 105 degrees, a 5-mile hike in the middle of the day might not be the best thing. Let's do early mornings, late afternoons to where the heat's not quite so severe. But definitely water, and let's not push them to the point where they, get sick. Start them off easy and then build up to the longer ones.
And you just mentioned the hiking earlier in the morning, and that's something that a lot of people don't take into consideration. You have, my friends are coming up at 10, so we're going to go hiking around 2.
Sure.
It's like, why don't you guys go hiking around 11 when it's not as hot?
Absolutely.
But some people don't really take that into consideration, and I am one of them. I'm one of those people.
Sure. Well, and we always, have these great advice for people, and we don't follow our own advice. But the biggest thing with hiking early, hiking late, I love the early morning hikes. The biggest thing is it's going to get hotter throughout the day. So as much as I manage the heat on one end, if we have an injury on the trail, if something happens, if the hike goes longer than expected, it's going to keep getting hotter. So we need to account for that. Same with our late afternoon hikes. Just because you planned on 2 hours doesn't mean it can't be 4 hours if something happens. Make sure you have a flashlight. Make sure you have something to where if it gets dark, you have the ability to get off the trail. Because as much as we manage what we think is going to happen, sometimes there are extenuating circumstances that change that. So just be prepared. And it's as simple as extra water, a flashlight, little things like that. Having your phone charged, just knowing where you're at, that type of stuff. Knowing the name of the trail you're on.
Yeah,
that's one thing I haven't, because we get a lot of calls, I'm on the trail. Well, which one? Well, the one that goes up this direction. Okay, don't get me wrong, Sedona Fire, we work very hard to know every inch of our trail system, but if you know the trail you're on, or you took a left at this intersection, it gets so much easier for our dispatchers to find you, and then we can get there faster.
We are keeping our fingers crossed that monsoon season is here, and if so, we're going to talk about hiking during monsoon season when we come back from the other side of this break. Countywide will be right back. Don't go anywhere.
From inspiration to installation.
If you need help with your decorating plan, call the pros at the Picture Window. We are your #1 source for top quality blinds, shades, shutters, and flooring. We've been in business here for 41 years, and our delightful sales staff has decades of experience. We're the locally awarded Best of the Best in both Sedona and the Verde Valley.
Don't pass up a free estimate on your project. Call the picture window now.
Paul Stanley here with Stanley Steel Structures. We offer shade structures that provide style, value, and performance. Our Equinox louvered roof opens and closes to give you the ultimate patio experience. We also offer Alumawood shade covers that looks like wood but lasts like steel and never needs painting or maintenance. Visit us at StanleySteelStructures.com. Contact us today and be covered tomorrow. Stanley Steel Structures. Let us add some space to your place.
Been hearing about the crazy benefits of CBD? Find out how CBD can help you at Sedona's #1 resource, CBD Sedona. Come in for a free consultation and let our trained medical staff help you find the perfect product for you. Pain relieving salves, full spectrum oils, honeys, teas, cookies, and even CBD for pets. Ready to feel fantastic? Come on by CBD Sedona today.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
I want to welcome you back here to Countywide. I'm your host, Philip Catalfamo. Today we are talking heat-related illness. My guest in studio today is Community Integrated Paramedic for Sedona Fire, Eric Walter. We have spoken about heat-related illness prevention, the beforehand, the if it's going on, what you should do if somebody you're hiking with has a heat-related illness. As I mentioned before we left to the last break, monsoon season is possibly here, and hiking is still going to be going on as the temperatures slowly go down to normal. And hiking during monsoons can be quite dangerous. So do you have any tips for hiking during those times?
Absolutely. Two biggest things. With monsoon comes lightning. So obviously just be cognizant of that, being out in places. If you are caught in a monsoon storm and there is lightning, obviously we're not going to want to hide under a tree. You're going to want to get into some open space. And the biggest thing too is check the forecast before you go. I know monsoons are kind of unpredictable, but just kind of knowing what you're getting into. Hiking earlier in the morning is probably better at this time. You're not going to get surprised. Right. Second thing that I'd be just mostly worried about is a lot of people, if you're hiking, a lot of times our trails cross like dry washes. Totally normal, not a big deal, but just understand that if you cross a dry wash during a monsoon storm, you could have a flash flood and that thing could be full. Or if you're in the wash, we actually lost some people in Payson, I think a summer or two ago, because of a flash flood. So biggest thing is don't hang out in those dry washes. But if you do cross one, understand that by the time you come back, it could be running with water and you might be stuck for a while. So just prepare for that type of stuff.
And that is, when I was talking to our producer Ryan Nichols before this, and we were talking over some of the questions, he made a good point saying that, just because there's not a monsoon in your area doesn't mean that a flash flood, like you mentioned in Payson, or even one like in Flagstaff, isn't going to make its way down here if it's got enough of enough force.
That's an excellent point. And yeah, a lot of people, you can be in a completely dry area, you don't feel like you're in a storm, and a flash flood can occur. There's very little warning for it. So yes, be cognizant of that. It does happen a lot in Arizona. It's a bad time of year to hang out in dry washes. Now, if you're going to cross one, just, that's fine. Just understand that things change during monsoon season and be prepared for that.
And we just got just about a minute here. So hypothermia. We know that when we do get to that winter season, I thought we just tease this a little bit. Hypothermia is a big issue. How do you prevent hypothermia?
The nice thing about hiking is a lot of the preparation is the exact same. Whether it's winter or summer, take the appropriate amount of water. Now, winter might need a little less than summer, but there's an appropriate amount. Biggest thing for hypothermia, wear the appropriate clothing. Try to stay dry. Make sure that you're going to an area that you're familiar with, and you're not trying something completely out of your box the first time. Like if you're going to hike through the snow, make sure it's a short hike through the snow. Make sure your shoes are appropriate. The appropriate shoes is very critical with any hike, especially in the winter. You're going to get cold feet, hypothermia happens. But preparing the same for any hike is just knowing the seasons change, everything else changes. Make sure our preparation changes with it.
So the biggest thing is being prepared for heat-related illness or hypothermia. We are entering the monsoon season. Be very aware when you're out hiking. Take the proper precautions. Obviously, bring a cell phone that's charged. Let somebody know where you're going, and if you need to, change your plans a little bit. So Eric, thank you very much for taking the time to coming in studio and talk about heat-related illness. That has been County-wide. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you again next time.